You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Welcome back to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today and we have another show lined up for you all. We have a special guest, Leanne Walling. She is someone that you need to know. That's why she's on the show today. She has a novel, The Salt and Light, and it's going to be following a character named Chris, an older LGBTQ woman. I should correct myself, as an older LGBTQ woman. She is going to highlight this book and share with us why she wrote it. So first and foremost, if you like RVing, you might like this book as well. So first and foremost, Leanne, thank you for being on. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's about, I'm happy to be here and talk about it because it's got a big Texas and Hill Country San Antonio connection. The book.
I appreciate that, man. And it also has a lot of points on spirituality, grief, loneliness, if you can say that 10 times fast. But when you think about stories, you are someone that you're passionate about writing, journalism. All that is a work of art, but also has a level of responsibility. So as a writer, someone who takes the craft seriously, how much work does it really truthfully take for someone to put these type of projects together? Because you don't just slap the stuff together and hope that people read it. A lot of planning, a lot of organizing and thoughts go behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, I'd always wanted to be a writer. I started out as a journalist. I worked for little dailies around Dallas suburbs. And then I headed east to Delaware to work for the state capitol newspaper there. But I always wanted to be an author. And so finally at age 68, I'm now 69, I graduated with a Master of Fine Arts from Drexel University in Philadelphia. And by the time I graduated, I'd written the draft of my first novel. So I had a lot of help, people, experienced eyes on it. I wanted to, make sure that my money was well spent. So I wanted to come out of it with a product, an actual novel. And it happened. And in 2024, I graduated. And then the novel got published in October. So yeah, I think it really helps to be older and you just have a lot of experiences to draw on. That's a big piece of it. I don't think I could have written something when I was, 22. Just graduated. I graduated from UT Austin, and I didn't have any life experience. My first job was at the KOSA TV in Odessa, where I lasted about 6 months. That's about all I could take. So, but yeah, it takes a lot of self-discipline, that's for sure, to just get up every day and say, I'm going to write 500 words or 1,000 words, and 75,000 words later, you've got at least a manuscript, maybe not a finished work.
When you think about the journey of the character Chris, like I said, I teased in the beginning, if you like RVing, well, guess what? It sets out with her on a healing road trip in a small RV after a sudden loss of her longtime partner. Kind of give us the background foundation of how you wanted to set up this character.
Yeah, it's definitely a road trip novel, and her partner dies in an accident that's partially her fault, and so she just decides to after about a year gets in a small RV, not one of those big ones, and heads out west to Utah where they had spent some time, and she was going to scatter her ashes at Bryce Canyon. And then after that, but she meets these people along the way who are really just kind of show up to help her heal and kind of relieve her loneliness and her guilt and her grief. And she also was struggling with her faith, so they help her find her faith again. And then she heads south to the Hill Country of Texas, which is where most of her relatives were living, and she hasn't seen them for decades, but her mother grew up there. So she tried to reconnect with them, and it doesn't go very well because they don't really approve of, how she's lived her life and the fact that she had a partner and all of that. But interestingly, my mother grew up in Fredericksburg and Kerrville, and all my relatives do still live in Kerrville, and I haven't seen them for decades. So there's some parallels there, although I've made all these relatives up. But she ends up volunteering at the local library and gets embroiled in this controversy over the Alamo and its history, and kind of some recent efforts to revisit that history and what was really motivating the heroes of the Alamo. And as somebody who had 7th grade mandatory Texas history, that fascinated me, because the Alamo's sacred lore to most Texans, and the heroes and the villains are pretty set in stone. And so this controversy at the library turns violent, and it forces her to kind of reckon with her life and what really matters. I'm probably giving too much away of the plot, but the Alamo controversy and the whole, my growing up in Texas and experiencing all of the Texas culture and history, it still fascinates me. I still feel like I have one foot in the state.
When people look through the lens, if I can call it the outsider lens, the character Chris, she's navigating a version of America that, maybe not in agreement with her lifestyle or her,
right.
But nonetheless, she's on this road trip, and would you say she is seeking connection, or is she trying to make a statement, if you will, about like, here I am, like her or not?
No, she's, she starts off kind of arrogant and a little bit elitist, and, she thinks it's her way or the highway about it. And then she starts to meet people who are really different from her, but that are there, to be her friend and to help her and to help her belong. She's at a campground in Moab, and she just meets a whole host of people and they go through a lot of stuff together there. And so that's kind of the first step in her healing process. I mean, she also, there's a woman there named Claire who has gone through a tragedy of her own, and they just become really good friends, and it carries itself throughout the novel. It's really also about kind of the depth of friendship between two older women, and what that means and what it looks like and what it feels like. So yeah, but when she comes to Texas, she definitely has her thoughts about Texas, but she actually meets a Baptist preacher who she makes all these assumptions about, and once again he turns out to be a stand-up guy who helps her along the way, and they kind of help each other talk through things and get over some problems that they're both having, but so I think it's just about, don't make assumptions about people. I mean, you think you might have people figured out. You think you see a type. Oh, I know that type. And then you find out they're a whole different kind of person. They're actually a good person, trying to do as much good in the world as you are. And I think that's one of the messages of the book, is to really put yourself out there for people, and they'll put themselves out there for you, and you'll both grow from the experience.
When you create books like this, it obviously creates a story. People won't be talking, whether they support it or if they have a difference of opinion. As a writer, why is it important for you to make sure that you still put work out there, even if people agree or don't disagree? Why is it still important as you, as an author, to still do it anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy if people read the book and totally disagreed with it and said, oh, that's not my version of Christianity, or that's not what I feel like it means to follow Jesus, or I think you've got it all wrong about Texas or Texans or politics or whatever. There's really not that much politics in the book, but I just think, the goal of what I wrote was to try to get people think about what they believe and what's important to them, and to not just, settle into some rut. She has some young cousins that she meets when she's in Texas, and they're sort of floundering and not knowing what to do with their lives, but they're actually the most accepting of her, of all her family, because they're young, and they don't have all the prejudices built up. So, like I said, I would welcome people who read it and then say, I totally disagree with what you've written in your depiction of Texans, or this, that, and I'd welcome that. I just want people to read the book and, think through it and think about it once they've read it.
It deals heavily with grief and guilt over death of a partner. How does the character Chris begin to carry that weight differently as the journey keeps unfolding?
Well, she was in an accident with her partner, and they were broadsided by a teenager who was texting and drinking. So it was legally the teenager's fault, but Chris wasn't paying attention. She was fiddling with her radio. And if she had looked up and been paying attention, the accident probably wouldn't have happened. So she has to come to terms with that. And the teenager, they end up, she forgives the teenager in a kind of a pretty emotional chapter of the book, where she's on a Zoom call with the prosecutor and the teenager and her family, and they just kind of talk through it. And she fesses up to the fact that the accident was partly her fault. So there's a kind of a big forgiveness ethic in there also. Then that's how she still feels really bad about it, and she wished it hadn't happened, but she starts to work past it after she forgives the teenager who hit her partner and killed her.
Once again, this is Refocus Radio and watching us online. Talking to our guest today, Leanne Walling. Go to her website, leannewalling.com, and we're talking about her book that you can get. My next question is, before we get to the halftime part of the show, is you take readers into Utah's Red Rocks and Texas Hill Country, like you kind of mentioned before earlier on in the conversation. How did these specific landscapes help shape the character's healing process and give it some kind of, I guess you can say, style?
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been to Utah. I've been there several times, and it's just this incredible, awesome place. And I think she just wanted to escape to some place that was, where she was just a blip on the cosmic screen, and she didn't really have to. She could just kind of bask in the beauty and the wonder and the awe of the place that was, that's just obviously millions and millions of years old with all these geological layers and everything, and it's beautiful. And the woman Claire, who has her own tragedy that she's dealing with, went there for the same reasons. And then the Texas Hill Country, I love it. I think it's in my DNA, because my family's all from there and my mother. And it's just this scrubby, kind of rough, hilly, place with scorpions and snakes. And it used to scare the heck out of me when I was little, and we'd go to visit my grandparents. But now I just think it's one of the most beautiful places around. So the scenery is actually almost like a character in the book, because it's so important to her and her changing over the course of the novel in these beautiful places she's going to.
And speaking of changes, you as a writer, as an author, specifically for this project, at one point you weren't in indie. You were going the traditional publishing route. Tell us what happened in that story and what made you want to switch gears.
Well, you come out of your master's program kind of all full of yourself and thinking that you'll get an agent and then you'll get a publisher, and you send out a query, to different agents, hoping that they'll fish it basically off of a pile that's on their desk or in their computer, and then they'll ask for a manuscript. And then they might like the manuscript, and then they'll sign you, and then they'll shop it around. And that's a process that, if it happens at all, takes years. And I'm 69 years old, so I almost gave up, period, just on writing and getting the book out there. And then I sort of stumbled on the fact that it's more than just uploading your book to Amazon. It's a complete process where I had the cover professionally designed and the book laid out, and I had a lot of consulting assistants to help me through the process. So where the book looks like, the reader can't tell the difference between a book that came from, Penguin Random House and this book that came from my own imprint, my own company. And so I'm pretty happy with that. And now I'm sort of become this ambassador for indie publishing, because the system, publishing world is a little broken right now. And unless you're already famous, it's kind of a catch-22. It's hard to get your book published. So I'm happy with the way I did it. I'm going to do it again.
When you reflect on how you were able to put a title to the book, my first question is, how hard is it to come up with a title for a book? And my second part is, how did you come up with this one?
Well, the Salt and Light Express is the name of her camper. And she got that from the Sermon on the Mount. You are the salt of the earth and you are the light of the world. So, she, like I said, she struggles with faith throughout the novel, but she really always believes in, kind of the basic teachings of Jesus. Some of the other stuff, the creeds and the dogma and the belief system and, all the pomp and circumstance, she's kind of left behind, but she's, down with those core beliefs of love, peace, humility, listening, caring, and she doesn't always succeed. In fact, she fails a lot. But those are the principles that kind of keep her going throughout the book. So the Sermon on the Mount is kind of like the basic manifest of Jesus' teachings, and there's a lot of almost practically poetry in the Sermon on the Mount. You have the Beatitudes, blessed are the peacemakers, and all of that stuff. So that's where the title came from.
When you look at people who like to read and want to read, and they pick up this book, what are you hoping that those who might feel like an outsider in their own family or their own community, what do you hope that they will gain from appreciating Chris's journey?
Well, I think she finally learned to see people differently and not make assumptions about them, like I said. And she decided to put herself out there, and I sort of put myself out there, deciding to be an author and, take all of the slings and arrows that comes with being an author, and some people maybe hating your book and some people loving it. But I just think that, at any age, and Chris in the book is a little bit younger than me, but not that much younger, you can choose to change your life. You can choose to step up and do something different. You can choose to reinvent yourself. I've kind of reinvented myself many times over my career. I started out as a journalist, and then I worked for when I went east and was a journalist, I gave it up to become the top aide to the woman who became the first governor of Delaware. Her name was Ruth Ann Minner. And then I went into land use planning, and then I had my own business, and then I retired and then decided to become a writer. So I just think if you're open to the experience and you're open to trying new things and perpetual learning, lifelong learning, that's really important too. That you'll be okay. You'll be able to get through some dark times and overcome some grief and loneliness, and just put yourself out there.
And speaking of putting yourself out there, not throwing you a curveball, but my next question is when you think about coming home, I mean, we know it's RV and a trip and all that, but for the character Chris, what does coming home look like for the character? And by the end of the road trip, what are you hoping that readers are taking away at the end of her journey?
Well, she gets involved with this library controversy, and the director of the library is Latina, so that just kind of amps up some of the opposition to having this panel discussion on the Alamo and its history, and kind of attempts to rewrite the history of the Alamo. And so after this, and she's been kind of nursing all the way through the book these feelings for Claire. I mean, they're really good friends, and they sort of have a spiritual connection, almost like soulmates. And I wouldn't say, at the very end, she just decides to lay it all out there. And like I said, put herself out there and reach out to Claire after this violent confrontation at the library, when she suddenly realizes how short life is, and she just can't pussyfoot around, what she wants and what's important to her. So it has a happy, I think, inspirational, hopeful ending. Now you made me give the whole thing away. Well, not all of it, but a lot of it. So, yeah.
Well, we will have to say to our audience, you gotta go get a copy of the book. I mean, that's what, when you think about the process of just trying to get people excited about reading. Mm-hmm. How difficult is it as a writer to be vulnerable, to know that, okay, once this goes out, we're at the mercy of the readers? How do you handle that as a writer? Or do you just not worry about that? You just keep...
Oh, I worry about it. That's why I'm on your podcast, to try to get the word out to different groups of people. Like I'm going to be in a book club, an Austin church women's book club. They're reading my book. I can't believe it. Somehow they stumbled onto it, and I'm joining their book club in April. And it's a great book club book. And a lot of book clubs are generally older women, and I hate to it's kind of the target of this book, since I'm an older woman and Chris is an older woman. And it's not just about her being gay. It's about just her being older and, in some cases invisible to other people. They don't really, they're not paying attention to her. They're not seeing her. And I think a lot of people my age and even a little bit younger can relate to that. So I would, definitely recommend it as a book club book. And I'm happy to drop in virtually, to anybody who wants me to. If you're gonna discuss the book, it's a great discussion. It's a great book club for discussion. Book club discussion. Yeah.
Once again, this is Refocus Radio, and listening to us on airways, watching us online. You can go to our guest website, Leanne Walling. Go to the website, leannewalling.com, and you can check out what she is doing. If someone is wondering, okay,
whoops, I was going to share your book. Whoops, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you good. I was saying, if someone's tuning in and they're wondering, man, okay, is she coming out with more books? Does she have any other resources that she's doing online? What are you up to? And if there's any updates, how can they keep tabs on you online?
Well, I have a Substack. It's called MFA and Beyond, where I kind of write about, to try to help people along the way that may be in the same boat I'm in, or maybe a little bit farther up the road. And then there's my website, and I have written a second book. It's called The Next Right Thing. And it's also has a Texas connection, so I can't get away from it. But the book's available anywhere, like Barnes and Noble, Amazon. You can get it on Audible. There's an audio version of it that's really good. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it pretty much in any format and find it on any bookstore website like Books A Million or anything else. So it's widely available, just like any other book. Even though it's independently published.
When you have the opportunity to talk to other authors, I've talked to many, maybe hundreds of authors since 2017. Mm-hmm. What are some of the resources, if you will, as an indie author, publisher? Do you network with people in person, online? What's some of the strategies you've been able to develop in supporting other indie authors and learning what they're using that may be helping them and can probably help you?
Yeah, I actually did a page on my website, leannewalling.com, that shows how the book was published. And it's not just about how my book was published, but, about indie publishing in general and what some of the resources are. Like, there's an Independent Book Publishers Association, which has a lot of great resources. And then Ingram is kind of where, if you're not on Amazon, that's where Barnes and Noble and libraries, a lot of libraries have gotten my book because of the library connection. And there's all kinds of resources on there about how to do this. You don't have to spend a lot of money. I happen to have spent a lot of money, but you can also do it, fairly cheaply. You just need to make sure your cover looks, that it's professionally done and it doesn't look amateurish and full of typos. So, and I had a proofreader and a copy editor, and I had my cover designed professionally and all that stuff. So that did add up. But I'm also retired, and I'm sort of in a good position of not having much else to spend money on right now. I'm blessed in that way. So, but you can go on my website, and if you're interested in kind of the process and how to do it cheaply and expensively, you'll find it on my website.
If someone tune in and they want to ask one more question about publishing, mm-hmm. What is the biggest thing that you learned that you wish you knew before?
Just how hard it is, when you're in a master's program, you're kind of in a bubble, and you think you're going to make it the traditional way, and it's just a lot harder than people think it is. But you just have to believe, and you have to get a lot of people. You have to be humble. You have to get people to read and give you feedback. Not just one or two people, but a lot of people from different perspectives. I had like a couple of ministers read my book. I had friends read my book. I had faculty read my book, and I listened to their feedback. So you just have, humility is important, because you can't think that you know it all and know how to do it all, because you probably don't.
Well, with that as a perfect segue to say, make sure you go get a copy of the book, The Salt and Light Express. Go right to our website, leannewalling.com. And before we let you go, if you had a message that you would like to tell people in general, what would you want them to know more about you as a writer? And if you have something that you want to just tell people. You've already helped people find my book. So I'm just going to encourage people to read, and to read different kinds of books, from diverse authors. I try to read all kinds of books from different walks of life, and authors of color, and LGBTQ authors, male and female. And there's just such a big, wide, wonderful world of writing out there. People tend to get in a rut and just read like James Patterson or somebody else, and just branch out, reach a little bit. It'll be worth it. Please read. Reading is fundamental, like David said. Yeah. Once again, we are talking to our guest, flat out of time, talking to Leanne Walling. Go to her website, leannewalling.com. Get a copy of the book, The Salt and Light Express. Like always, I want to say to you, thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.